You're experiencing the Authentic Chaos Podcast, an exploration into our inner selves and journeys of self-discovery. I'm your host, Vahagan Yarnosian, and joining me today for a second time is Stephen Ritchie, the host of The Power of Perspective with Stephen Ritchie. Stephen, thank you for joining me.
I am very happy to be on. I'm really excited to do another episode. Yeah, it was really fun the last time, so it should be interesting. I think
Yeah, we had a
we've
we had a great chat last time. If you haven't heard it, I'll put a link below. But we talked about like being the most extreme version of yourself, and my viewers may remember that on that podcast you had actually talked about starting up your own podcast.
yeah, that's become a thing,
Yeah. So
and
how has the podcast journey been for you?
yeah, I'm enjoying it a lot. Actually, it's uh, it's it's cool. Like, going in, I wasn't sure what to expect. I don't have, this kind of background, I guess. I've got friends who are in film and things, so I thought, oh, okay, this is going to be a big one. Let's take it on. But it's going really well. I'm getting the handle of things like editing, working on the speaking, and I've gotten together some, I think, a really amazing guests. Some friends, some people around the Cape Town scene, and slowly getting a bit more broader. And yeah, still finding our identity,
Hmm.
but it's a cool journey. Like, just coming up with ideas and what who to find, and just I don't know. I actually love it. If I chat to my friends, I sort of go on about, oh man, it's so cool, and oh, it's fun, and we're. I've learned a lot, and it's amazing. When you give people the right topic where they've got passion and a good wealth of knowledge, it can make for such an interesting cocktail. You know,
100%.
yeah.
And the cool thing about your podcast is not only have you like been very prolific and creating a lot of episodes in a short amount of time, but you've also covered so many. Like you have episodes on mythology, on relationships, on like gaming, on business, like all these sorts of like all these various topics. So it's like this real like breadth of discussions and also very depth because like you go pretty deep in each of your episodes, which is really admirable.
Yeah, if you're looking for a lot of diversity and quite a sort of deeper kind of thought provoking sort of stuff, it's quite there. You're right. Like, I've got a lot of interests, and I think I've met over the years some very sort of interesting people, and I think maybe I draw that kind of person. And so, yeah, it's from exactly all sorts. So from my hobbies to just general interest, from things like emotional intelligence, some maybe relationship, more interpersonal stuff, and then more just war mythology, medical things. It's sure no, it's been a ride, I think.
Yeah. And so I highly encourage my audience to go check out your pod, The Power of Perspective with Stephen Ritchie. Once again, I'll put a link below so it's easily accessible. Um, but for this episode, I wanted to talk about the name itself, the power of perspective. I believe that names are important. The words we use matter, and titles, especially, are extra important. So, what what, in your view, is the power of perspective?
You know, I think, you know, as we listen to other people and as we do, our own experiences, you learn so much, and you see the world in like such a different, and almost you get more excited about the world. You realize there's actually a lot out there. Maybe it's not so, mundane. There's, you know, and y- you start to find a lot more things interesting, and y- it's, I don't know, it's so cool. Like, you can just start a chat with someone on something that you're like, oh, okay, that sounds okay, and then you like get really into it. And everyone sort of has their own view in the world, I think. And You know what I like in a discussion type format is when it's not just kind of an exchange of knowledge, it's an exchange or a shared thought process. You're almost like taking your thinking process and almost merging it or interacting with their thought process and just kind of bouncing around that and seeing, where do you align and where does it go? And, you know, so I find that really cool. It's so stimulating, right?
Yeah.
you know, the,
It's
the,
almost like an agreement or like a dance or something. Like the way you describe like your thought processes like interacting with each other. It's like two different persons' thought processes. Maybe they're similar, maybe they're not, but like you have to come up with some sort of agreement, some sort of harmony.
yeah. I think that's but it's just like, debating's quite fun or just, a healthy discussion of kind of finding, you know, I think it kind of starts to boil down to values because, the type of angles people take on things and where they sort of lean.
Yeah.
And that even just sort of indicates interest, right? If you notice they start going in that direction a lot, there's clearly sort of a deep interest or value on that. And comparing that to your interests and values and just kind of seeing where this little fun adventure goes, I think it's very enlightening, I think.
So, what are some ways that you've reflected on how your values have like influenced your perspective on the world?
So I think, you know my values over time have sort of maybe changed or at least kind of been refined or more directed. I think how I see the world, like You so, like, what I sort of focus on, I guess, in my time sort of changes. I think things like passions and relationships and just kind of values, like, I think things like, kinda, I guess, integrity or, what's really going on with someone, like compassion, empathy, those things, almost just start off as, like, ideas or like, that crowd is
Or
into that, but that's
beliefs?
not really my thing." Yeah, you know what I mean? It's not like
Yeah.
growing up like the norm. It's like, "Oh, okay, there's a special type of person who gets really into that." But then you kinda realize, "Oh, I can see why they're into that. Oh, I'm into that." And so I think you also become a bit more forgiving about people. You start to understand kinda where they're coming from, and even if you oppose the idea, you don't you don't push the ideas on people, right? You're like, "Cool, you're doing your thing, you've come up with your thing, and I'm just kind of getting to understand and maybe even enjoy where you're coming from, even if it's not where I'm coming from." And so you almost it becomes more sharing what's out there as opposed to just this is what I am and I'm just going to focus on that. Yeah. So maybe it just becomes a bit more a broader sense of things, not just me, and what I want, but more how can I take what's going on with other people's and kind of incorporate that into my thoughts and even my actions. And yeah,
So you're suggesting that like your belief that like others have like these different perspectives or different like um different pasts, different stories lets them come brings them to have different beliefs from you, and because that's your belief, you have a more empathetic perspective. Is that what you're suggesting?
yes, no, exactly. It's it's almost because you can start to understand or at least be able to engage in the things they're into and their backgrounds and their kind of perspective. You're not just alienating it and saying, oh, that's wrong or
Yeah.
that's uninteresting or that that's too different. It's almost like taking the world's a playground. It's a place you can explore, an adventure, not just these are my five things and everything else is just stuff that's there, I guess, and
Yeah.
just let's ignore it. And I think maybe that comes. with time and change. It wasn't always like that, you know?
So how are you before, and what do you think helped change you to get this more empathetic perspective?
I think part of it is going through struggle. It's always like this, what do they call it, duality or kind of split idea of, well, I don't want struggle because it sucks and it lingers with you and it can have a sort of grasp on you for a long time. But at the same time, when you've gone through challenges and struggle, you kind of grow, but you also start to understand things, and there's almost value in that. As people, it's like a lot of kind of proactive change come through struggle, and it's almost quite valuable to people. It takes you out of your comfort zone and it lets you kind of develop as opposed to kind of be stagnant. I think, yeah. So, and like I start to understand things. When someone's got an anxiety, you know, I'm starting to understand what they go through. I can even relate. So that becomes a discussion of its own. I'm like, oh, wow, we can talk about this thing. We've gone through it. It's
Yeah.
such a human thing. It's not just like, that's just a thing, I guess. It's like a human experience we can all sort of share. And, a lot of things, I think maybe just finding a bit of purpose and
Well,
sort
I
of
meant
dealing with
I I
insecurities.
meant
Yeah.
less less the general and more the specifically what allowed you to shift to this more empathetic perspective? Were there struggles
Yeah.
that you went through that helped you gain this empathy, or were you always
Yes.
empathetic?
Um, so I think I was at some level. I've always sort of been known as kind of a nice guy. I think part of it was I wasn't out there to kind of screw people over or kind of take advantage of things. I I was just kind of there to have fun and just have people who I guess I cared for and they cared for me. And I
You were
didn't
there
think
for the
much
good
about it.
vibes.
Yeah, just for the ride. I didn't like read into things. I didn't have like objectives. Think people like that. I was just there for good, healthy fun and not trying to get thing out of people. I was really just being myself. And so, but then it became more proactive. It's through like struggle and just learnings, chatting to interesting people, having some maybe unusual experiences or whatever. I don't know. It sort of led to a place and it created an interest, right? I said, okay, cool. Well, I've gone through a lot of these human things. I've gone through a lot of the struggles. I've also gone through a lot of interest. I've read up on things. I've developed kind of a wealth of knowledge in interpersonal and just even other sort of topics, maybe peripheral topics. And I kind of want to share that with people. And I actually, I like to engage in these things, but also if I see someone struggling, I want to help. Or if I see I've got a skill I can offer someone, I want to give it to someone, right? It's, it's like taking, when you see someone struggle in something, it, that can hold you back so much. That can be like almost like life halting or life changing. And when you just give people like passions or like I call it the tools to kind of thrive in life. Like I feel like I'm not that into just doing things or just kind of I guess kind of handouts. It's more I've learned this great thing. Let me share some insight or let me find you the support systems you need.
Hmm.
And I think being able to sort of actually enjoy sort of that process of kind of maybe helping or just understanding or just sharing, not feeling so alone and making other people not feel so alone. it You become part of the community. You're not just a person out for themselves. You're a person that's generally interested in people and generally just kind of hoping for the best for them. you know it's amazing, just little pieces of insight or little motivations. People can change the course of their life. I learned some things and at certain points in my life, and I went through certain struggles, and I mean, I think it changed my life. I had parts where I didn't know how far I'd get in life, and overcome that. And I've seen people they've just met the right person, or seen maybe the right therapist, or had the right support system, and they turn their life around. And isn't it cool when everyone's kind of maybe thriving, or just being held back? They, yeah.
Yeah. So, what's an example of like a simple thing that turned your life around? Because it sounds like you were probably thinking of some of these as talking about that.
Yeah, reminiscing a bit, I suppose.
Yeah.
Um, well, I think part of it is being able to value who you are, but also taking kind of self care became a big thing, right? Learning what works for you, how to take care of yourself, and even in relationships, it kind of gives people a roadmap uh, uh, of how they should treat you. If you treat yourself very well, people will learn, how to treat themselves well, how they should treat you. How do you like being treated? So I think I learned a lot of self care and how to take care of myself, and focus on building your own self esteem, not just trying to get others' validation. So maybe it's a bit of that, you know, don't care what other people think type thing. So that helped. And I think just choosing the right people. I came from quite a bad sort of crowd. There was some, gems in the mix, but I had a lot of people in my kind of circles, or that I was sort of forced to interact with. So
Yeah.
there are not some friends that weren't so good. Some I dealt with a lot of bullying, so I struggled with that. To build the self-esteem from that hole, and to I also think I learned to take proactive steps in life, as opposed to just letting life push you around and you're just going with the flow, being like, if I have a problem, if I have something that makes me unhappy, I don't have to stay in that position. I can work a way out of that. I'm capable. I can move away from struggle. I can move away from, or even giving up people that are toxic. Or it's hard. It's really hard to kind of move away from people. Uh, but there gets a point where you have to say who adds value to your life, who's good for you, or who makes you feel all anxious and worried, and who brings joy in your life, makes you excited, for
Yeah.
day to day. And that took a lot to, because it's a combination of, I think, creating an environment, socially and just internally, and creating a good lifestyle. I'm quite health focused. I had a lot of, I guess, health issues along the way. And yeah, take care of yourself, uh, I think maybe mentally, physically, socially, and yeah, just don't stress as much. Things kind of work out in a way. You just got to have the right tools and dodge the some of the holes in life. There's a couple holes that if you fall into, makes things a lot harder. So
But I mean, you probably would admit that, like, and you can say if I'm off base, but it's probably because of the struggles you went through that you can confidently say that you'll be able to like navigate the holes in life because you have experience navigating holes in life.
yeah, these insights aren't handouts. I had
Yeah.
to learn them. I luckily along the way I met some very insightful people. I had a very good therapist at a stage, and I just realized the value of tools. Things like how to build a support system, how to surround yourself with positive influences, how to connect with people, how to choose constructive hobbies, how to, you know, create habits and get rid of bad habits, and deal with conflict, and deal with, career struggle and academic struggle. and just get out of that kind of hopeless moments where you just you just kind of self-pity and just if you I think you develop the confidence of like no matter how deep the hole is, I can get out of it. Or even if I don't feel capable, there's a way out of it. I think my dad said at some stage, no matter how bad things get, things can always get better. And, life has a funny way with working out. It's just, yeah, if you dodge the holes, it makes it a lot easier.
I think what also helps, and what's helped me, is changing your perspective on the hole. Maybe it's actually a much shallower hole than you think it is. Maybe because you're in the bottom, you think it's this bottomless, this like endless pit. But maybe it's actually got a ladder or a cave, or it's like easier to get out of than you think it is. Or maybe it's actually very shallow and you can just hop right out. Maybe it's not even a hole at all, but just a divot in your path. What
Yeah.
I think a lot of us, like myself included, like we found everyone has parts of ourselves that we're not a big fan, right? Like demons, maybe demons or vulnerabilities or things about you that you really wish you didn't have as a trait. That you're kind of
Yeah.
ashamed about, and you may not tell many people about, like secrets that you hide. Um, but and those can very well, those are holes that you've put yourself into. Those are parts of yourself that you are hiding and you don't know how to get out of. So you just try to avoid it, but your part of you is in it. And
Yeah.
what helped me is through conversations with some family members who've gone through similar things, have faced similar demons and got out on the other side, is changing the perspective on these holes. Just instead of trying to avoid them and push them away and pretend that they're not a part of you, instead accept them, embrace them as part of the whole that is you. Just like
Yeah.
we say that, I even had regular viewers will remember I had an episode on self-love, and my position on self-love is that it is the hardest thing to do. The hardest person to love is yourself. And that's because we're taught that true love for another person means that we have to accept them for their greats and for their flaws, right? But we don't
Yes.
hold ourselves to those same standards. We hate ourselves for our flaws and we love ourselves for our great things. But if we did that to someone else, to another person, people would call us toxic. That would not be
Yeah.
a healthy relationship. So why do so many of us have unhealthy relationships toward ourselves?
I think maybe one of the things is we see all the bad parts. And,
Hmm.
in other people, you don't you won't, right?
Right?
You're not them. You don't know their experiences. And so although we also see the good in ourselves, it's also part of our design in a way is that we focus on the bad, but also we see all the bad. So, it may be overwhelming. You're like, oh, I'm struggling with this and I'm struggling with this, and this is not a great trait, and maybe this is a weakness. And you think, you get this perspective like no one else struggles with these things and that's when it helps to be able to chat to people and relate and really understand.
Yeah, and
And
challenge
so
your
you
own
feel like,
perspective.
yeah, no, exactly. It's it's seeing, I think, firstly that, you're unique. You have potential, but also you have great characteristics, right? There's if you've got people who are your friends, everyone's got friends, right? There's obviously something they like about yourself. Unless you're some sort of, I don't know, deep narcissist or something, there's things you care about. There's aspects and even people you care about. We're social creatures. And I think, yeah, maybe don't be as hard on yourself as you can be, but also just realize that we can change, we can develop, but we can also accept. You know,
Yeah,
I see no reason that everyone can't be happy, but sometimes you need to find the tools, or you need to have the time. Time's a valuable thing, right? The the way you spend your time, you can achieve a lot in actually not that much time. But if you're not doing the things and the steps, you're just gonna stay in this position.
I think that time is one of our most valuable resources, and it's also one of the most underappreciated resources, especially in when we think of time in the context of money or as in relation to money. We are inherently devaluing our time because money is fine, but money is never going to buy you more time. Your time is never coming back. The time that you're living now is gone once it's passed. Maybe you add more years to your life, but that's not the time that you have now.
So, I mean, I can maybe just give a sort of sense of my path, and that might give some insight into, you know, these sort of accepting and being proactive. So, for instance, I had periods where I was very sort of depressed, very lacking a support system, and just feeling like I'm going nowhere, and that there's nothing good about myself, and that, people are out for me, and then I judge. And as I transitioned into, a good space over quite a long time, I realized there's qualities that are very powerful and very valuable in me. And I didn't see it like, these some of these great things about myself. And I think a lot of people, great things about themselves, you don't see. You're so absorbed about the world around you, you don't even realize. And so I guess acknowledging my strengths and my value, and then, as I said, changing my environment, getting rid of toxic influences, finding positive influences. So my environment changed. My It started with the realizations about myself, and that sort of enabled me to change my internal and then my perspective. And, through engaging with other people, and even just helping them or just sharing and emphasizing, I, I learned tools. I all of a sudden wasn't lonely. I all of a sudden had traits I actually actively focused on and, used, I think maybe empathy, and maybe, I'm quite a I think in a unique way. I've got a good, nice sense of humor, and I'm quite a passionate person. And as opposed to thinking about all the bad things, I started to think on the good things, and I started to meet, the type of people that were good for me or that I could relate to, and it just became. A, it's part of the perspective change is seeing what's really going on. Part of it's, as you said, accepting, and part of it is once you've sort of gone through this, just realizing what actually helped, like support systems, and then you can share that with other people, and that's almost the next step of kind of, I guess, sharing or, maybe even maintaining that sort of state. And so, yeah, I think everyone, I'm not special, but it's I came a long way, and, you know, uh, I'm quite excited about things. And yeah, I don't see why other people should suffer or can't, deal with their problems, or, find those genuine connections, find that meaning, happiness. It's just it took time, and it
Yeah.
took like very big lows, and it took the right people, the right advice, but also the right sort of internal understanding. And part of that came through a lot of reading and studying. So yeah, and
So
even achieving.
yeah.
When you achieve something, it creates self-belief, right? Or, if someone acknowledges something of value, you start to acknowledge that, okay, well, if people say this thing's valuable, maybe it is valuable. And if you achieve something, like you get through some of your studies, or you, I don't know, do something of note, you then you realize you can achieve something. And then, maybe the world's a bit more of an oyster.
Well, yeah, definitely. And so, um, I mean, and it sounds like you took a lot of intention to change a lot of things in your life, which is very admirable. And I think some of the things you said are very like resonate probably with many different people. Like, what helped you identify that some of the people in your life were toxic for you at that moment?
Well, well, firstly, there was I got bullied a lot. I do with the whole thing. I'm a very advocate against it because it can be very damaging. It can be very lonely, and it can take a long time to get through. So, I mean, that was part of it, right? There was even people who were my friends, they'd bully me, um, and you just kind of identify maybe what you're struggling with and then what's causing that. Not just the superficial or just the immediate, like, obvious thing, like finding that kind of deep rooted stuff. And things like therapy or just experience and maybe even just knowledge can help you there. So
So like talking
yeah,
to
so
other
I mean part of
people helped you gain like a new
yes.
perspective on around the
Yeah.
people in your life.
Well, maybe when you talk to people, other people outside of the people who are maybe not great for you, and you start hearing their insight, if enough people around you say, that friend isn't great or that group of friends is not great, maybe there's a trend, like, and if you notice patterns, like, this person treats me like this, then I go into this spiral and this happens to me and I feel insecure, but then it I get through it, and then we're back to being chummies, and then we think, oh, okay, cool, there's no problem here. But then it happens again, and it happens again. Wait, I think identifying patterns in your life, if you have this full circle of going from a great place, this event X happens, and you go through this downward, and then you come up. Those kind of patterns happen all the time. I see people, I have an example of this girl who she had quite a like maybe narcissistic boyfriend. Things would be great. He'd give her all the validation, all the love bombing. But then at some point, he'd take advantage of her, or there'd be some fight, or there'd be unreasonable demand. And then, she would say, this is not great. I don't love this person, and this is a struggle. And then she would spiral and get upset, and then she'd need her support system to help. At this stage, I was part of that, which I took on a lot of the strain. But
That can
but
be
then
really
she got
tough.
back to that place. Yeah, and we'd have the same stories. I'd be like, "Yeah, that happened. That's why it happened. That's a bad influence for you." And then, she'd be like, "No, no, it's fine." And, whatever. And it happens again and again. And, if you don't pick up these things and you don't listen to those people who care for you, it's yeah, patterns is everything. Patterns is a great way to get stuck.
Yeah. And I think that brings up a really powerful example and maybe something that a lot struggle with. Like let's say you have someone close to you, like you did, who is stuck in this perspective that is actively hurting them. And how like do you have any ideas on how you can even help to like maybe change their perspective a bit, or is that something that they kind of have to figure out on their own?
I think there's maybe truth in both sort of angles. So the first thing is part of it is that you have to acknowledge that this friendship, if you're going to maintain, is it worth it? Is it worth taking on their struggle? If so, don't get yourself knocked out of the equation. Don't like be the person who's the fall guy. You try too hard, you try very hard, and then because people might sometimes just will shift all the blame onto someone. People sometimes like doing that. So you have to be not too pushy. So you have to help, but not say, it's my way or the highway. At the end of the day, someone's got to help themselves, right?
Right.
All you could do is offer them the tools and the support. Maybe support is softening that blow and just kind of encouraging, and the tools is giving, sharing life skills and so on, so that they can help themselves. All you can do to empower them to help themselves. You get this thing in like relationships called the savior syndrome, where someone basically does all the work and just says, cool, I'm going to save you, I'm going to dive into the water and fish you out from the where you're sinking.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I can change
it's
him or her.
yeah, yeah, people don't easily change. If someone People can change, but it's not easy.
Yeah.
Something sometimes profound has to happen, or they have to have a long journey. So if someone does something or treats you badly, you should proceed with great caution because that can stick. That can just be a recurring thing. And although your perspective will change and you'll believe it's true and then not true, it's just a, the, yeah, it's so I think, yeah, so you can be supportive, but maybe like I read up a lot. I seeked advice. I've empowered myself to be the best possible, I guess, advisor,
Yeah.
so that when you say something, it's valuable. And eventually, if it's valuable enough, they're going to implement it and be like, wow, what that person said really helped. So maybe I should listen to them more. And so it's kind of like bridging that gap between thinking you're just saying things that they shouldn't take to heart and getting to the point where they maybe trust you, but what you say a bit more and actually implementing those things. But yeah, unfortunately, the thing is, people have to have the desire to help themselves. You can't force someone to take your advice or force someone to 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 do something, but you can give advice, you can point them in the right direction, you can help soften the blow when they fall. And but I just find giving people the knowledge and tools and being like, "Yeah, take it or leave it. Maybe what I'm saying is useless. Maybe I could be wrong, but this is what I've learned in life, and this is my insight, and maybe it works for you, maybe it doesn't." So supposed to be being pushy, just being like, cool, here's a little gem, maybe you find it shiny and helpful, maybe you don't, but I've learned it out in life, and yeah, maybe it's something worth looking at. So yeah, that's part of it, is just hoping. It's tough, right? Just seeing someone struggling and they just keep maybe doing the wrong things and keep just the situation going.
Well, I think it's
But
also important to recognize that you are coming from it from your own perspective too, and your
yes.
perspective is maybe more limited than theirs. In your perspective, this is objectively a wrong situation from them, but from their perspective, it's more complicated than stability. That's a part of it. Maybe their needs that are being met. So I don't think we should go into situations where we hope to change perspective by expecting that we would ever change. I think the only thing we
Y-
can ever do is like exactly what you said. We can be supportive parts of their network. We can be there for them in the good times and the bad. And we can be authentic about our own perspectives. And if they listen, if they're at a point where they want to actually, if where they want to listen, they will listen.
And maybe if they're not, listening to you, if you introduce them to someone of value, maybe they listen to that person. I mean, don't force it
Yeah.
upon them. Don't be like, you need therapy, but just be like, hey, I've got this cool friend. I thought you guys get along. And then they're like, oh wow, that person was actually really cool. And then maybe it goes somewhere helpful.
Oh, so here's a question. Have you ever had a scenario where your perspective on something where you try to offer help was actually incorrect? It's read the situation.
I mean, we can only do the best we could do. But I think you have to acknowledge that my perspective could be wrong. I could not have all the facts. I could not have developed,
I mean,
but
when do you ever have
no.
all the facts?
Exactly. But, it's just, I say that, to me, this thing maybe is what seems to a lot of the time lead to a better outcome. Maybe for you, it's not the way that leads to a better outcome. But I think you had a good point on, when people come up with a perspective, it's not some willy nilly thing that they just popped into their head. They have developed that over a long time. And you need to kind of respect that, right? It's, I think it's funny when people get into well, it's not funny, but that's just kind of a way of speech. People will often maybe go into an argument expecting that they're going to change the other person's opinion and they're going to make them believe what they believe.
Right.
And the thing in that is that people have formed their opinions and perspectives over a long time, over maybe long life journeys. And so to in one short interaction be like, cool, I'm going to change all of that from to something else. It's very ambitious. So, I mean, I think that's maybe the difference between healthy perspective going into a conversation and unhealthy where I'm right, you're wrong, or if I push hard enough you will believe the thing I believe, when sure, having a whole life story and being like, cool, I'm going to invalidate that, and you'll see the light, of course. um you know what I mean? You're fighting this whole ship, and you're just trying to sink it even though it's gone over a long journey in one moment.
I will say though that not all perspective has gone through the same long. Some
Yes.
beliefs are like incorrect and have been propagated through like propaganda or whatever, or like misleading information, and maybe aren't thought about but are never challenged. For instance, like the usage of MSG in the US, like there's a huge stigma against monosodium glutamate. It's a very common food additive. It's naturally occurring in like tomatoes and mushrooms. It's what gives that umami flavor. But because in the 90s, like a lot of Chinese food was being added to Americanized Chinese food was being added to malls, a lot of suburban white moms were eating it and were getting dehydrated and getting headaches. And what were actually dehydration headaches was attributed to the MSG in the food. And so a huge like multi-decade like campaign against MSG was started, and now people like hold this belief that MSG is bad for you even though there's no scientific basis for it. It's not something that people actively think about, but it's a belief, it's a perspective that people still hold for no real reason other than it was never challenged. So some perspectives are that way. They're just never challenged. They just take hold because of that.
No. Well, I think every idea you come across, no, if it's going to be something that alters your decisions or you're going to place value on, you should vet that and really think about it and ask around. Do
I
your
agree.
research, do your grilling, because that thing you've placed in a position of importance, something that proactively determines how you treat those around you, the decisions you make. These have big repercussions. So if it's something that you're not taking to heart, like I'm neutral on some things, and some things I'm like, well, this thing is not important enough to me to that I have to be right about it. If I'm wrong about it, that's fine. Life goes on. Sometimes you can be like, sorry, it's I thought I had the right idea, but I honestly didn't place enough value to vet it. But the things that are going to have a big impact on your life, and the way people see you and things, think hard about those. Not just accept it because you saw an article or someone told you it, or marketing's been pushing it for years. That's an example of taking a proactive approach to your life and not just assuming the way things are the way things are. If something seems like a norm, think about why is it a norm? Because maybe a lot of people who have else also decided it's a norm are making decisions because of that aren't helping them at all.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really great point. I will say that like I've been reading a lot of books on decision making and operating in certain worlds because our world is inherently uncertain. But the way that our mind deals with being wrong is akin to like how our mind deals with like survival issues. Like being wrong is treated as like this gut wrenching like feat, like I don't want to accept this. Like it's a very negative, it's like loss. Loss is a much stronger feeling than gain. So when you when you are wrong, it is a much stronger feeling than when you're right. So people want to avoid being wrong at costs. um
I mean, yeah. S- So, in life, there's going to be quite a lot of times we're going to be wrong on something, right? But you have all this time to every time you find out you're wrong about something to grow and to learn, right? But if every time you're wrong, you either fight to not change your opinion and just like, some people. won't be confident in their opinion or able to back their opinion or thoughts on something. And they're just okay with that kind of wonky, well, this is probably flimsy, but I don't want to think about when this isn't true and have to, face that reality. Yeah, but there's a fear to being wrong. Maybe it's a bit of a trust thing. If I'm a person who thinks things that are wrong, how can I trust my ability to, absorb information and to give advice to people and make decisions, right? It doesn't place a lot of confidence in yourself. But, you know, you're gonna that's the difference between just letting maybe events just determine your perception of yourself. You have to sort of nail down what are you good at and um, you know w- what type of things you get right and wrong, so that when you are wrong about something, you don't feel like your world's been shaken and everything's wrong, nothing makes sense. Is this my reality? um, these could be extended to bigger topics, like belief systems and things. And I think not in the religious sense, but in things that people believe in that are very important to them, and they're scared to have that challenged. And if they're disproven, it's almost they feel like they're a lesser form. It's interesting, right? We have all a bit of pride in the sense that we're scared to feel like we're lesser than someone else. That
Oh yeah.
they have something over us. They're right, we're wrong. They obviously make, maybe we think, better decisions, and they're smarter. And inherently, that means we're not so smart. We can't perform, and because we are these things, they think we are these things. It's like this weird thing. We think this bad thing about ourselves. That's like, slap on your wrist one. And then we think other people think these bad things about ourselves, which is like two levels of almost developing an insecurity. And also just reinforces the idea. And yeah, so that's a tricky one of itself, right?
Oh, definitely. And maybe if you want to try to tackle those bigger what if I'm wrong situations, like for the bigger belief systems or bigger perspective systems, whatever you want to call it, uh, I think we just need practice. We need practice in accepting that, hey, I might be wrong about this thing. And maybe start with small things. Admit that um, I'm reading this book written by a professional poker player called Thinking Bets. And her proposal is that, like, in any decision you make, in anything that you believe, there's always an aspect of skill and there's an aspect of luck. And if you think that everything is all skill or all luck, you're kind of deluding yourself. It's somewhere in the middle. But in doing so, when we're making decisions or we're exercising our beliefs or talking about our beliefs, we should get in the habit of saying, like, of adding some uncertainty to it. Like, oh yeah, it like instead of saying it will rain today, say it might rain today. Like there's a 80% chance of rain today. Or um or like, oh, instead of saying like MSG is 100% bad for you, be like, I've heard MSG is bad for you, but I'm not, like, I haven't tried it myself, so I'm not quite sure.
Yeah. Well, I think if you've used something to make a decision, a piece of knowledge, like, okay, MSG is bad, so I avoid MSG products. And, then later, you're determined that maybe that isn't right. You're not bound to that, right? So if you've made a decision in future, in the same scenario, you can make a different decision. You're not
Are
locked
you
into
bound to
that.
any past decision?
Well, exactly. Your past is just a piece of time in time, right? A piece of your story. You have this. You have time ahead of you. You have the ability to acquire experience. In a way, the world's a training ground, right? You can try things out. I think the best service you can do for yourself is prepare yourself for this training. Have the right tools, the right gear. Maybe choose the the regimes of training that seem to work a lot. And if you're I don't know, Formula One racing, maybe learn about the engine and the things that the real inner workings behind it, right? So yeah, use your time and use this ability to make mistakes, and then correct those mistakes and to grow as a just a. It's not that life isn't in a fine place now. Where you are now is fine, but you know there's a lot to look forward to and a lot that can improve, and that's part of the fun of life. Saying, well, there's all this cool things out there, all these little toys and all this maybe potential. It's not like saying, oh, if I don't get those things, life sucks and I suck as a person. It's saying, when I get those things, life's that little bit extra sweeter, and I'm that little bit extra of a cooler person to myself.
So you mentioned you described life as a training. What are we training for?
um, I think more it's we have this tool in front of us in terms of we can try ideas, we can try out a hobby, we can try out a perspective, we can do that one thing that makes us a little bit scared, sing in the rain and see what happens. We can go through struggles and lows and then bounce back and use that experience. you know every experience gives you something to learn from. So it's more, don't freak out at every moment and be like, oh, this is this is my life now, or you know uh, I can't come back from this. No, I mean, of course you can. You'll figure out happiness. You'll figure out how to deal with that problem,
Yeah.
and you're growing, and no one's expecting you to have it all right. We're all kind of figuring it out, but as you figure it out, I think it's good to sort of try to figure it out a little bit more and a little bit more here and there. If anything, to see the full picture and get a perspective of like not assuming what's going on in the world, but actually uh, finding that understanding of what's really going on, and not just assuming the way things is how it is and how it'll always be.
Do you think a goal of your life is to like try to understand the world as fully as possible?
So, when you make it a goal, it's some like people's goals can often be, well, this thing's lacking, so I need to achieve this. Uh, you know, but I think it's maybe a pursuit. Like, if it goes nowhere, it's fine. But a- as I try things, as I develop a bit of perspective, I realize like, hey, that was valuable. Let me develop a little bit more perspective. So I think it's more the appreciation of the value I get through these interactions and gaining of perspectives and knowledge. And yeah, I think finding things of value and pursuing them, maybe that's a goal, but just because they help. I don't need them, but when I get them, I'm like, wow, that was really cool. And same with people. If someone is adds a lot of value, why not try to get a bit closer to them, or try find more people like that. There's you can only you can only find more out there, right?
So you're like constantly trying to look for that more. Is that what you're trying to do?
Yeah, I think so. It's not that I need it, but I like it. It's almost a discovery of seeing what is out there that I'm maybe not aware of. And
Where does that like perspective come, or that belief that
I think maybe, yeah, more can add value. I don't know if it's better is better always feels like there's the the implication of not good enough. I think I've enjoyed the process. F- I, I've learned such amazing things from certain people. I found such wisdom in certain experiences. I've overcome a lot of things, and I feel capable. I like being capable. I like being able to exercise agency. I think that's a really cool thing. I like being able to forge who I am. You know, you can be this we have such an ability to influence and actively change our environment and just to grow. You can become this, maybe this little like Mr. Bean car type thing, a little, I don't know, Uno or something that's a bit shabby. Then you get a little bit of modifications, some upgrades, and then you take care of it, and all of a sudden you're this little Ferrari driving around. And you know if you appreciate something, you take care of it, right? If and I think it's just I like the potential and discovering that potential. What could be. That's exciting. Whether it's found or not, that's not necessarily a goal. But I enjoy the maybe I'm curious, the curiosity of seeing what's on the other side, and just enjoying the finding out.
I've maybe as a little bit of an aside, I've noticed the all the car analogies you've been using, the one and like Ari.
Yeah.
Where 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 does your passion for cars come from?
It's actually I'm actually not a car person,
But where do
but
the
I
analogies come from then?
honestly, I think it's sort of I got a good piece of advice, I think, at a time where it was of quite value, because the value of things can change based on when and how it's received. That you know, y- basically, it boils down to you're the person that you're living with, right? You want to enjoy being with yourself and your experience in life, right?
Yeah.
You're the person who's most invested in in care of yourself and yourself thriving, right? No one is going to look out for you like you look out for yourself. So this sort of metaphor that I got was, if you've got this Ferrari, right? Um, Ferraris are pretty cool. This is maybe acknowledging your things that are good about yourselves that appeal to you and other people. You're gonna take care of it, right? You're gonna scrub it, you're gonna shine it, you're gonna change the oil, and you know, why would you want to, you know, let it wither? You you know, like, why would you want it to struggle and fall apart? And there was this kind of metaphor that really stuck with me on the notion of that, you know, if anyone's going to look out for yourself, it's going to be you. You have the most invested. You can't necessarily rely on other people to replace that job because they've got their own things going on. Definitely, there's times where you will find people who help out like that, but you can't rely on that. And just kind of, I guess, becoming the best sports car you can be quite fun. But at least just taking care of what you got, even if you're not flashy. I- If it's hey, if it runs well, it runs well. Hey, so yeah, I think it's just that metaphor resonated with me from someone who gave that to me, and so maybe just I reflect on it when I think about other examples and perspectives, and maybe just naturally relate on it. That's an example, right? Like a piece of advice or a piece of wisdom can become a core philosophy, and when you find other like domains and pieces of wisdom or advice, you can tend to actually kind of relate it to this other piece, and that's a bit of perspective of its own. Maybe acknowledging pieces of wisdom, and so it comes in, right? It maybe even they reinstill each other. If yeah. So
Yeah.
anyways, that's the source.
So me, like as another aside, it's interesting that like this analogy to a Ferrari like stuck with you so much as someone who's like not interested in like I don't care about cars personally. I don't see any in like I don't have any interest in Ferraris or Lamborghinis or whatever else. To me, they're all the same. When you say like it's a cool car, I believe that you think it's a cool car. I don't think it is, and I wouldn't want to compare myself to a Ferrari because I think I'm more valuable than a. Think I am like more. I am unique. I can think. Ferraris can't think. Ferraris can't create their own sense of self or their own journey in life. A Ferrari is ultimately a tool that you have to use or that people use. It has to be driven by someone else.
I had a friend who have a friend that they at some point in life just wanted to see how much they could love themselves. Not in a like a cocky way, but more how much they could take care of themselves and develop themselves, and just as almost a trial in life, and see the best way they could take care of themselves and see how that is. If you kind of make yourself into the the most cared for version of yourself, seeing how that affects you. And I just saw how it affected them. I'm like, wow, that's so cool. So this person spent a lot of time on themselves, developing their interests, hobbies, enjoying their time with themselves. And that, they realize that, you don't necessarily have to focus on the external, because when people see that, they're like, oh, that's so cool, and they're immediately drawn to you because of that. And so even though you've been spending all this time on yourself, it's almost the equivalent of if you had spent all that time on trying to get other people to like you, or if you've made yourself very likable and someone who, it also shows that you value yourself. And if you really look like you value yourself, other people are going to be like, ooh, well, there must be something of value there. And if you look really together and, fun and exciting, they're going to be drawn to that. People are going to like those things. And maybe, you might even feel like a role model to them. And that might help them along their way. And, when you help people, there's a bond that forms. And maybe that closeness will create, as opposed to just a superficial friendship, something really deep. So, yeah, that's an interesting someone who just really focused on themselves, is almost uh, a study of, what happens if I just the external, just let that be a blur away and just focus on myself and see how the external changes. And that had quite a profound impact for them.
What were some? So, what are some of the takeaways that you learned from their experiment? Self love.
Ooh, uh, well, I mean, firstly, I just learned the what I can do. I learned when you believe in yourself and deal with insecurities, the the impact it has on the way people see you is huge. The quality of your interactions change can improve a lot.
Yeah,
I
because you're
think
more confident
if
in
you
yourself.
yeah, if you're able to handle any situation, that makes you confident in yourself. It makes you maybe proud of yourself. And it makes you enjoy just hang out with yourselves and almost just maybe even enjoy tackling life and dealing with challenges, because it's like Hercules entering a battle and like throwing lightning and stuff and being like, I can do this, as opposed to being fearful of dealing with challenge in life. Maybe just be a bit more enthusiastic and excited to be like, yep, let's see what life can throw at me, and let me show life how I can get through it.
How do you get to the point where you feel like you can take on anything? Because obviously you can't rely on past experience to say you can take on everything because you haven't experienced everything.
It's more, it feels like an experiential thing. Now, I mean, exactly. You can't obviously can't know you can take on everything, but it becomes like a pseudoscience in the sense that if I've dealt with that issue and then that issue, and I feel like I could do that, and like you almost build like kind of a list of achievements or just things you can think on that you've done, and all of a sudden you start to feel like your odds of success in a scenario is higher because you've dealt with other challenging scenarios. And if you do that enough, although you're not like certain you can handle a scenario, you start to feel very confident, right? It almost becomes a surprise if you don't handle a scenario because of that. I was chatting to the full circle phenomenal guys, and they said they've dealt with so much challenge and fear and scenarios they thought no one could get through, and things they thought they could never do, and because they've actually been able to build towards those and do those things, and get through situations that seemed impossible over and over again, they, although don't say it's a certainty, they feel so confident in a positive outcome that it's almost a science. That's like such a belief in your capabilities that you're almost you can almost handle anything. It's just that belief. Belief sort of leads to outcome. If you've developed enough backing to trust that you can handle things, you have sort of a list of evidence, then it's becomes quite hard to not trust the evidence, right? It's like anything. If you hold a position on something and you sort of have like a loose position, and then you see something that supports that position and another thing and another thing, and all of a sudden you have a whole repertoire and library of books that support this idea. When you see something that's against it, or you've got a lot more to lean on for it. And so it's you can, definitely absorb the challenge, but feel that, yeah, it's I'd be surprised, I suppose. Yeah. So it's not like just assuming you can handle anything. It's building enough experience and confidence in yourself that the odds of success are high. And even if they're not, you'll survive. You'll figure it out.
Yeah, I think building that perspective, that belief, that of like trust in yourself is crucial. That's like one of the most important beliefs we can hold if you want to like try to achieve whatever you want to achieve. If you want to like it is it is self-fulfilling in a way. Have you felt like you've been getting working toward that point or have gotten to that point?
Like there's still a lot for me to figure out in life, but in some regards, a lot more than I did. And I, I mean, yeah, I, I think what I've done a lot of, and I'll sort of paint the picture is when you deal with a really hard challenge, uh, you can start, and enough of them, you can start relating them. So you get a new challenge, and you're like, well, I've dealt with that thing. That feels like a similar level of challenge. If you've dealt with like the hardest, challenge, obviously it's not the hardest, but like what feels like the hardest challenge, and you get another challenge, you're like, well, if I could do that, why not this? It's so there's this technique I know where that helps people not worry so much, where think of the worst possible outcome. Then you think on when that happens, will you be okay? What really will happen? You just play it out and say, like if the I don't know, you you're doing an oral and you forget all the words and stuff. What is the worst? Well, maybe you feel a bit embarrassed. Maybe the speech doesn't get received so well, but no one's gonna hurt you or hold it against you. And so that's the worst case scenario. So if the worst case scenario starts to not look so bad, well, you got a lot of best case scenarios. So maybe don't stress so much.
Yeah.
And even if the worst thing happens, you'll be okay. but it probably won't.
Yeah, I think that's a good. I think that's a good way to start thinking in terms of probabilities. When you accept that there is risk in your decisions and accepting what that risk could be, it doesn't necessarily have to be the absolute worst case. You can figure out what your acceptable form of risk is. If you decide, hey, I want to quit my job and travel, you don't have to say that the worst case die. You could say worst case scenario is I draw down to this amount in my checking account and then go look for another job. Or let's say you're going to go travel to Europe. Maybe the worst case scenario, I mean, obviously a lot of things, worst case scenario is like could be death, right? Like the absolute worst case
Yep,
scenario.
that's the
But
pretty much.
we can, there are usually points before that, and there's like an acceptable risk that you take. So like maybe the acceptable
Yeah,
risk is like you get into uncomfortable situations in a place where you don't know the language. Well, that's not so bad. That's a very acceptable risk. And if things go bad,
yeah.
go home.
I mean, yeah, it's like you're not always gonna get the this idea of when you put your ducks in a row, it's a good ambition, but what life throws at you and what actually happens in life to a large degree is a bit of a mystery, right? You may
Yeah,
think,
there's luck
you know,
involved. There's probability, there's
that,
uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen.
yeah. But I actually think the part of the joy in life is it's not great when these things happen, but it's that where's it going? That makes me so curious and interested. Because you have these ideas of what a happy life looks like, what you want to do, and that's great, and we should strive for things, right? Otherwise, we're a bit aimless. But when you don't get those things, you realize, oh, that's fine. I've grown, or I ended up because I didn't do that. I did this thing, and you almost find better outcomes when just because you learn. And like the best parts in my life are nothing I planned for, but I found them when I didn't get the things I wanted, and I found other ways. Now the thing is, when you don't get what you want and you just sit there and you sulk, well, then you're not going to find the other journeys in life, because I think the best things in life are often the things that you find on the journeys you didn't plan for.
Yeah. It's like there's that saying like those who wander are not lost. There's also like similar sayings of like um like if you don't seek, you will find. If if you like open yourself to the possibilities and to the like letting the journey of life happen, you will find what you need when you.
Yeah.
And it's not that the
I
universe
mean,
is going to give it to you, but that you will be approaching things with a more broader view, a broader vision. And and when you have this broader perspective, instead of a perspective of searching, which is very narrow, you will notice more things. You'll see the
yeah.
beauty in the world in ways that you didn't before, and the beauty in life in ways.
I think maybe the like a nice piece of wisdom in this is just keep searching. Don't think things are the end, because a lot of the best things you just find by searching. I think
I say
when
keep
people,
wandering. I say don't even search.
yeah,
Just wander. Just
yeah,
go through your path, because no one can tell you where your path is going to take you, and your path hasn't been paved by someone already. It's your path and your path alone. Other people can help you along, maybe provide you some guidelines, some like signs along your path, but that path is yours.
yeah. But maybe be mindful of what's going on as your path diverts, so you don't miss out on the great things that may come. If you're so distracted about the plan, in quotes, or you know getting towards certain things, or you're so obsessed about the thing you just missed and trying to get it back, you might miss a lot of things. You at this, things don't necessarily just land in your lap. So you gotta keep your eye out and play the game. It's opportunity when it comes. You gotta grab it, right? Otherwise, if you don't reach for it, it might just float by. Uh, you know, like this just makes me think about my friend on dating with apps and things. He says, it's fine to not focus on, to be like, okay, this dating, things not going so well, and I'm not getting much matches at this stage or whatever, and at being accepting that maybe this is the time it's not going to happen, and focus on other things. But if you just totally like forget about the game, and every time you have an interaction and you meet like someone wonderful, but you don't actually think, hey, maybe I should pursue this. You just totally forget it's a thing. Well, you might miss out, right? So as he says, is that even if it's to get you got to play the game, even
Yeah.
if at this stage you're happy with the outcome as it is, as things are. But if you don't keep your eye out and see when opportunity comes and pursue the opportunity, and you just say, "Oh, I don't care about anything. I'm just gonna. I don't. Those things aren't gonna work out. That section of my life's failed. I'm just not gonna think about it." And then something comes. Well, you might miss out.
Yeah. And that's an example of potentially changing your perspective to a negative way, going from a hopeful, like searching for a date or searching for a relationship, to changing your belief to saying like, oh, I'm never gonna. Is like then you're going from a very like opportunistic view and to a very pessimistic view where you will miss these because you will never open yourself to those opportunities.
Yeah, I think maybe don't just focus on grabbing at. Why am I thinking of fruits? Maybe I'm hungry, but grabbing for certain types of fruits. If apples and bananas are what the good things in life are, then I think it's more just looking for potential and opportunities, but also not just kind of sitting on your couch and like switching channels till it comes, but rather creating a base where when an opportunity comes, you are ready. So like things like, a a good environment, a good support system, a good set of knowledge, good friends,
And
good
trust in yourself,
opportunities,
like good
skills.
internals, like trusting yourself, being like finding that like love for yourself or that belief in yourself. I think that's even more crucial than your environment.
Yeah. I think, like for me, it's about maybe it's part of the odds, setting yourself up for the potential of success so that when the opportunity comes, you are eager, you are ready. Like, if if you're super fit, it doesn't matter what event they throw at you, you know, you're ready. So that's why I say, like, you know, for instance, if you've got like things you're struggling with, mental health struggles and things, I think it's good to work through those. Or if you don't have people of value around them, finding those people, because when opportunity comes, having all these resources and tools and potential to act in a situation, when something of great potential comes, your odds of success are really high. So it's not about saying that that is the only way to do something, and if I don't do that, it's not going to work out. It's just making the decisions that have the highest um, odds of success. And if you don't get success, well, you'll find success elsewhere. Now, that's what I say with people with like, maybe interpersonal advice. I'm like, you know, uh, maybe being healthy, or, not judging yourself or judging other people. These kind of things, maybe they don't always lead to the best outcomes, but your odds of success just tend to be a fair bit higher when you start to take these very healthy habits, healthy behaviors, and constructive decisions, they just tend to lead to good things. And if they don't, they don't. This is You don't have to push
It's
things on
interesting.
yourself and people.
It's interesting that you put it in the reference of like that the things that you're doing to improve yourself don't necessarily lead to the best outcomes. I would say doing the things to improve yourself, like that is the best outcome. Like you can't control what goes on in the environment, but
Yeah,
you've literally like improved your life and your journey.
yeah,
Like I don't see what like other outcome you could ever want. Isn't that the whole point of even being in a
yeah.
relationship and like
It's the journey. Yeah,
trying to do this journey of life? It's so that we can be happy with ourselves and choose happiness every
yeah.
day and like live a healthy, happy life.
I think it's more maybe where I'm sort of trying to come from is the idea that go for the things that are the highest odds of success, but don't if you see a scenario where it doesn't lead to the expected outcome, don't be deterred and be like, well, this was a waste of time. This thing obviously doesn't work. Give things a chance and be like, well, it's I gave myself the best tool set. That thing didn't work this time, but maybe it'll work next time.
Yeah.
And I mean, I sure it will, because if it's a value, it's gonna find a point where it exercises its value.
Yeah.
Yep.
How do
As
you
this, that's my
think you help like what helps you determine when you're making like the bet when a decision will have that highest odds of is it like a gut
so
feeling? Is it based on prior
no, no, no,
experience?
no, 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 no gut, no gut. Gut feelings is good in a way, because gut feelings is trusting your internal, um,
Your
but
instinct?
your instinct. It's a reflection of the internal, not just saying, well, I'll just whatever other people say is what I'll believe, I guess. It's tyranny of the majority. If a bunch of people say that, well, my internal doesn't matter. No, of course your internal matters. Your gut definitely matters. There's value there, but still listen. So I think behaviors that historically lead to good outcomes, and behaviors that to a lot of people lead to good outcomes, those implementing as many of those as possible generally leads to success.
Like what?
Taking care. So, looking for certain traits in people generally will, let you find people that are gonna have good outcomes for you. If you look for capable, maybe um, empathetic people on top of their emotions and their struggles and stuff, and you surround yourselves with them, they're going to probably have some good value. And if if you, I don't know, do risky behavior, and uh, then bad outcome happens, the so I mean, like, I'm quite a half for that. So for me, like, it when I, you know, do how eat well or exercise, I feel better. When I seek, good personality traits and develop those in myself, I tend to find, you know, people that turn into better friendships or better relationships. And sure, like maybe I could find those elsewhere, but just tried and tested advice. I'm trying to think of a good instance, but often when I'm helping someone with, some internal struggle, I'm like, well, the research and my historical sort of experience has shown that if you do X, Y often happens.
Like a
And
very
if you don't
logical
do,
approach.
yeah, exactly. And if you don't uh, do X, well, often, Z happens. And I think that combination of research and knowledge, because you can't just assume your experiences are the whole scope of reality, but also historical data is really important, because someone says this, you have this cool like article you read and you're like, oh wow, yeah, that's the truth and that's so useful, but you have no evidence that that is going to work for you, or that that's has the value.
But where's
I
the
think it's a
evidence?
combination.
But where's the evidence that you and like let's say another person would make a good couple? Like, there's no historical context behind this because you are two very
Yes.
unique people. So where is the historical evidence?
I think maybe things you can relate. So if you find that you work well with people who are, you know, interested in other people and compassionate, like for me, that's I found quite a draw. Like then, if you've seen that works for you before, it's a good sign, right? Or you see someone that is really on top of their mental health struggles. It's not that people who are struggling with mental health can't be amazing partners and stuff, but historically, I found that people struggling with these things often creates really stressful and unsuccessful relationships in terms of myself. And so I look for people who are, I think, caring. I find intellectual, who actually take care of themselves, and don't have destructive habits or don't risky behaviors, and don't have the types of insecurities that can have quite powerful negative outcomes. And so, I mean, those type of things, they've been successful in the past, and research seems good on those things. So I guess that's my
What's the
go-to.
research? Is this a Stephen funded
I
research?
mean, I
The
don't know if
Ritchie
this is a good
Institute?
example, but no, man, just like I don't know, like I read a lot of studies and things. I'm not always good at recalling calling the right thing at the right time, but certain, I think, personality traits, at least, seem to work well for certain types of people when you kind of look at, like, I guess, the knowledge out there, and then I try to relate that to my own experiences and being like, yeah, actually, no, that's happened to me a few times. Well, maybe they're onto something. And maybe that's reaffirming of like, well, maybe other people can validate what my gut says. And I'm not just going on this little bit of a spooky hunch, right? Although I'm
Why
capable
do you
person.
distrust your instinct so much?
Hmm, well, tend to feel like I'm confident and capable of myself. But when people have those moments where they don't know how capable they are in that area, or maybe have a bit of self doubt, when you can are reaffirmed by either hearing someone's perspective about that, or them reaffirming it in terms of your social circles, or someone external like a researcher or something, or someone who's written a book or has just said really profound things that seem to work for you, and that, I guess, that validation of maybe I'm not full of shit. Maybe or maybe it just reminds you that when you have that time you messed up, we don't always do the right things, but that doesn't mean you're a failure as a person.
Yeah.
It just means that it didn't work out, right? You maybe did the wrong thing at the wrong time, maybe you misread the situation, but you are very capable in handling similar future situations. And I guess when you see it backed up elsewhere, it just reminds yourself that those things are true.
Okay.
I don't know. I find it reaffirming. I find the idea that, well, I've developed an experience where I believe this about myself because I've seen it in action a lot of times. But then also seeing that the type of things I do that lead to success for myself are the types of things other people do that lead to success for themselves. And then I don't feel so alone. Like, am I doing the right thing? Because I've seen other people do it and clearly it worked for them, and then I think, well, it's worked for me also. So let's
Have you
tackle
ever
this
tried to do
challenge.
something that other people haven't done?
No, well, I mean, yeah, like, but it, yeah, I'm not scared of the unknown, but I think I try to look for things that at least have something to go on, like lead to good outcomes. Sometimes I guess you have to try things. That's how you learn, right?
Yeah.
But setting myself up for success is what I try to do. So I guess I aim for that, but so maybe but at the same time, I don't aim to do things that other people haven't tried. That there's a bit of something to back my expected outcome, but I'm not scared about those things. But maybe I don't push for them. Yeah,
I guess like my view of dating is very. I used to be very simple. I'd look for certain qualities in people, but then I completely changed my perspective on it. Started looking for, started examining my own, what my needs were, and like thinking about why did I even want to get into a relationship in the first place. And once I thought about it in terms of what the needs were that I needed to fulfill, one, I was able to find ways of filling some of those needs, friendships and other net community, but also I had a lot less like I didn't need to doubt myself as much dating people or unknown to me, like um because I'm not dating from the perspective of finding looking for certain traits. I'm dating in from the perspective of help to like help me in my journey, fulfill my needs, and I need to understand their needs and see if I'm right to fulfill their needs, because qualities ultimately, things change.
yeah,
Maybe at some point they're compassionate and something, and they can handle like previous issues in their life, but then maybe a tragedy happens. Maybe they haven't experienced real like big grief before, or maybe they strike gold and make millions of dollars and it changes them in expected. There are tons of unknowns,
yeah.
people. You can only know yourself, and
That's a fair point. I think it's easier when I reflect on like things that don't work, where I'm like, things like insecurities or heavy codependent behavior or uh, people who aren't able to maybe take advice or deal with deep struggles. Like some struggles you can get through easily, but some they're they're tough and they can take a lot of strain. I think in terms of good qualities, I look out for them, but I'm not like it has to be that. uh but I do evaluate it as favorable. I'm like, cool, they've got that. That's a good sign. And I think I just look for good signs. And then I'm like, that's a good sign. That's a good sign. And I'm not seeing many bad signs. Makes me feel a bit more confident. So I think on negative things, I am a bit like, I'm going to avoid that. Or if someone's a bit toxic, sorry, there's good qualities, but I might, push you out. So I think there maybe more stringent, and the good qualities is more just kind of a framework to keep an eye on and pursue a bit, but it's a lot more loose on that side. Because you're right, the partner or the close friend that comes is not necessarily who you expect, and a lot of the time it won't be. But I think it's still good to keep an eye out for things. Otherwise, you might be going blind or
maybe
going
the
in blind.
expectations are blinding you. They're putting a belief on
Yeah.
who you think that person is instead of seeing them for how.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like everyone's got value in their own way. Uh, I guess it's finding what is valuable to you, but in that, well, more in this situation, what value or what do I really like about this? Is this something that I'm like, oh, this is so exciting, or is it something that's like, this doesn't seem to work for me, or I'm not. This is not kind of that big win. No, I call it wins, where I'm like, some things are. I told a friend, if you try to match me up with someone, and you want just the easy wins, where immediately my attention's drawn. There's a couple things where it's like, well, if they have that, I'm going to be drawn in quite quickly. It's not it's a good way to get in the door, and from there, we see how it is. But I would say on negative things, if I see certain negative things, I might steer clear quite quickly because I've learned certain things are they just lead to bad outcomes. Certain things for sure that you can be forgiving, they don't necessarily mean there's bad things going to happen. A lot of traits are like that, right? You know, sometimes someone maybe smokes or something, it's a bad habit, but that's not catastrophic. But you know, some things, people who are spiraling the whole time, or some things just historically, I've just realized lead to very tough situations that are often too hard to navigate.
So it sounds like emotional stability is an important need that you have.
Oh yes. Like, and it's kind of hard because, as like this person who in the past has been a bit prone to a bit of savior, I've helped people, I feel very good at it, and I have a deep interest in things like psychology and human experience, shared experiences. And so, I might be drawn to people who are struggling a lot. And that's, I mean, it's all cool to help and all, but if you're trying to putting someone really close to you who's got a lot of hectic stuff going on, and there's a lot of destructive things happening, and you're putting yourself in the middle of this whirlwind of chaos. That's not a doesn't feel like a great position. I'd rather be in a position where there's like it's smooth sailing, there's things are just constantly exciting me and improving, and I have nothing to worry about. Like I say, if you go into a relationship, there's two things for me. The one is that you have to be on top of yourself. You need to feel like you are a great candidate. You got to feel that what you bring is going to be really helpful to them, something that it's going to make their life happier and enjoyable. You're not bringing problems and stuff. So internally, you got to feel like you're a great recipe for success for someone else, where they're really going to have a great experience and you can offer a really good thing for them, and not this ball of trouble and insecurity and things. So I think you need to be at your top game in the gaming scene, or at least be in a good spot, not be in an all-time low. If you're in an all-time low, figure some things out. Because and then the person bringing in, right, there shouldn't be problems at the start, right? I think at the start it's meant to be exciting. You see all this potential, you're like, oh wow, they've got such cool things going on. I'm in a good place. I offer a lot of value, they offer a lot of value back, there's a lot of chemistry, and everything's great. As opposed to this, because there's these good qualities and things I like, but there's also these little storm clouds that are very destructive. And so sometimes you see the good things and you kind of try to ignore the bad things, but those bad things, they come for you, hey? And so I think when going in, you want to like feel like the potential's really high from the start. Later on, sure, you learn things, problems come, we deal with adversity, we you deal with conflict, and part of dealing with conflict is seeing how we how able you are to grow together. But I think going in, like, you want like a recipe for success. I think that setting yourself up for success, if you see breaking problems from the start or things they're really not on top of, yeah, I think that's how I see it. Maybe it gives me a bit of security, but historically, when I've tried to ignore those things, or uh, things have not worked out so well. And historically, when I've had certain things in a relationship or friendship, those have thrived. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's where my radar's at. Yeah, I'm figuring it out, but that's, I think, my kind of philosophy, or at least compass. And we navigate the sea and we see where it takes us.
Where do you think your initial belief, your initial like perspective of saving, helping people?
Ooh, okay, that one is a good one. So I mean, when I was dealing with a lot of challenges and things, and definitely in terms of like mental health and bullying and things, I saw like a really good expert, and I had to reach out to a lot of support systems. My mom was fantastic, And so there was some good influences, but I had to lean on a lot. I needed to utilize a lot of things around me to really get through. And part of that, trying to solve my own problems, and also part of interacting with really effective people, and especially a very good counselor who's amazing. And I developed an interest in it. Why not, right? It became an obsession, right? It's if you're going to put in so much work and so much, learn so many things, and try so hard, you know, it- things often in those scenarios are going to become very interesting, almost obsessive. And so I put so much into it, and I learned so much. And so it stuck with me. After getting through that stuff, I had a deep interest in interpersonal stuff, into self growth, into helping other people. So that just stuck with me. And so, you know, those part of it is just having those interests when I encounter a scenario where those almost become relevant, and I can almost, get the joy of those things out, if that makes sense. Like, I can have the type of discussions that really interest me. I can utilize the skills that I enjoy using. So when the opportunity arises, I'm just kind of drawn into it. And also, I think I developed a lot of empathy. And when you see people struggle, it's tough, right? You just kind of want to be like, let I don't want that for you. Let me help. So, and I think that came from having more insight about not just seeing a struggle and being like, well, that's probably bad. I guess it looks like a bad thing. More going to the point of like, I've experienced that, or I experienced something similar. So I know that sucks. I know that that is a huge hill to climb. I know the impact it is. I know how hard it is to be in that position and think those horrible thoughts about yourselves, or feel alone. So, like, I can relate to those feelings. And uh, I want I don't want that for other people. And so I think that being able to not just like observe something and be like, yeah, I kind of understand, but to feel like, yes, I really can feel like I can understand to some degree what that really is like. And now I have the skills to, if those were my issues, I'd be able to handle it very well, right? So let me see if I can take this capability that I can enact to myself and offer it to you. And so, you know, what I've experienced on myself, hopefully, maybe I can be part of that process for you. I feel like some of the processes I've gone through have been really fulfilling, have really brought joy into my life, and hopefully I can, be a part of that process. So I think between the deep interest in the type of themes and discussions, and kind of that empathy, but also that feeling capable, like I feel like I can help and I want to help. So I feel like, everyone likes to feel like they're of value. So I feel in those situations, I can be of great value. And what I say actually is something that's of value, that maybe it's worth listening to. And it's not just, my 5 cents. Actually, my 5 cents maybe come from a really strong place. So I feel like between being excited about, hey, I've got this great tool, and now I can show people that, or show someone that, hey, I've learned this thing. This is a really awesome thing. Give it a try. Let me help you. So it's all those little angles. It draws me in intellectually, it draws me in emotionally and empathetically, and it's rewarding, and it almost just removes a bit of the suffering of seeing the struggles in the world, and being like, does the world always have to be that way? Do people, are they just going to be bullied and then go through life struggling and feeling insecure? Or, can we take steps to remedy that? So yeah, I mean, it's so all of that kind of makes it very easy for me to lose sight of being effective, and sometimes it's getting a bit too drawn in, and rather than acknowledging solid boundaries, which by the way are very important. Boundaries are in relationships and in life is huge. If you ever want to figure out a great way to deal with things, there's a who's that book? There's a great book on boundaries, and this one in relationships. But anyways, a fascinating but very valuable topic about, what to accept from people. It's basically a framework of how you should allow people to treat you and what your role is. So, am I stepping too far? Am I being helpful? Is this really my place? And so I think that's helped, but it's still sometimes a bit hard. Sometimes as that desire makes holding those boundaries trickier, which sometimes makes me end up in situations that preferably avoidable. But I've gotten a lot better. But at stages, I definitely had some bad moments or struggles with this. But it's a it's vastly better now. So at this stage, I think I steer clear of those scenarios. But yeah, a long answer, but that's probably where I come from.
What helped you like further set those boundaries and enforce them?
I think partly insight, maybe some respect of, you know, not just being like, do this is the answer, I get something out of it, but being like, at what point is it of value for me to push to give this advice? Where should I just step back and be like, okay, I got to get out of the scenario, or I have to give you space, or when should I become involved? When should you be supportive? So
When should you
it's
just listen? Sometimes all you need to
exactly,
do is
yeah,
listen.
exactly. So I guess it's just becoming more better at kind of knowing what role you should play in a scenario. And yeah, I guess it's respect for yourself, knowing how you should allow other people to treat you, and respect for others, thinking about how they deserve to be treated, and at when are you helping, and when do you have good intentions but you're actually being destructive.
Well, I think that's a beautiful sentiment and perspective uh, to start to conclude on. Thank you again, Stephen. Do you have any final words before we conclude?
Uh well, I really enjoyed this. I'd say that, yeah, everyone out there, I really, sort of wish you the best. I think there's a lot of happiness out there to be found. And if you're struggling with things, there's people who want to help. There's tools that will get you through it. Don't feel alone. A lot of people go through these things, and you are a lot cooler than you think. You are capable, and yeah, just at some level trust your gut, but also look for things that generally sort of lead to high odds of success, and acknowledge and integrate those. If you see something works for a lot of people and it works for you and it's of value, integrate, I think, as many of those things into your life as possible. And it just gives you a solid foundation so that you can bounce back from situations and reach your goals more effectively than you may otherwise. So yeah,
Awesome.
yeah,
And where can people find the power of perspective with Stephen Ritchie?
yes. So yeah, basically, yeah, that my podcast channel is available on Google Podcast, Spotify Podcast, and Apple Podcast. We also have an Instagram running, Power of Perspective with Stephen. That's
Here?
the handle. Yeah. And yeah, we uh you should check out some of the content. I found some really deeply interesting speakers, and we've just had some great times. And yeah, I mean, I always appreciate the support. And yeah, keep an eye out. There's, if anything, variety coming. So
We'd
yeah,
love to hear that.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much again for a really fun chat. Um, your listeners, if you're watching on Spotify, YouTube, wherever else, make sure to like, subscribe, follow, share the podcast. It helps out a lot. Um, Follow us on Instagram at authentic.chaos, handle here. And as always, embrace your chaos with kindness. Thank you again.